Hi, so it has been several months and I have lots of books that I have been reading over the summer, and I thought I would come back, so I haven't filmed in so long, I thought I would come back and just go through all the books that I read over the summer because I definitely was reading, and there are some here that I absolutely loved, some, actually quite a lot were very mediocre. And so what I wanted to do is I'm going to split all the books out into ones I would recommend and ones I would not recommend, so that you could use this video as a recommendation video if you wanted to, or if you just want to hear about me try to remember all the books that I read over the last 3 months, then obviously stay tuned. All right, let's go through the ones that I would not recommend. There are several books that I DNF'd as well. I'm not going to go through them because I am going to be unhauling them. So I'm going to go through them in my next unhaul video. But these I read to completion. So the first one I have is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This is the second book of hers that I've read. I really liked The Dead Romantics, but I still thought that was quite a mediocre romance book, and I feel like this is the same thing. A lot of people were raving about this at the time when it came out and gave it like 5 4-star reviews. And I thought, okay, let me give it a try. It's in the middle. There's nothing like particularly special about this book. Everything is very predictable, and I think with any romance it is predictable, but it just has to be written in a certain way to make me maybe either fall in love with the characters or for them to be believable. And I feel like and Emily Henry does this really, really well. I think Ashley Poston is not too far off, but I didn't really get enough. Like, even at the end, I just didn't get enough of these two. I didn't feel their romance enough for me to ultimately care at the end of the day. I thought it was an interesting concept though. And yeah, I don't think I would recommend this book, quite honestly. If you are into a very light read, a romance, summer read, then maybe. But I think overall, it's one of the mediocre sides of romance, in my opinion. I'm sorry, people are gonna hate me. They're gonna click off. You're gonna click off. I'm sorry, goodbye. Next one is Chloe Gong. This is Foul Lady Fortune. So I picked this up several years ago, just randomly. I bought it from Amazon. I didn't really know anything about the story or the characters. Apparently this is a spin-off series from another series that she's written that I think are supposed to read that series first. I have seen that you can read this on its own, and obviously I did read it on its own, but I kind of went into the world not really understanding anything. It's more of a sci-fi fantasy romance, if I'm going to be honest with you, because it's not really like fantastical. There's just more like science fiction elements to it, where, you know, this girl is basically more of like a superhuman. She can't really die. She's kind of immortal, but she was made that way. She's not born that way, like as you get in like a fantasy. It did take me a little bit of time to kind of figure out what the book was trying to do, because she is a spy, and I didn't really quite understand the political aspects in this book at all, like the different groups or gangs, I guess, as it were. But it's set in China, and it's set in 1930s, and I think that's the reason why I bought it, because I thought we're kind of like that era. And it was good at the end of the day, but I don't think I would recommend it, just simply because I don't have any want to read on after this. So this is one of several books. I could read the prequels or like the other series connected to it. I could read the books after this, but I feel like I've read the book. I kind of seen where it goes. There's a little bit of a romance, but it didn't ultimately catch me. I wasn't totally consumed. I felt the writing was a little bit, I don't know, kind of sketchy. Not bad, but it just wasn't smooth. I also read To Cage a God by Elizabeth May. So I tried reading this about a year ago and I didn't get very far. Picked it back up because I didn't want to like DNF it without trying to read it. So I picked it back up this summer and I read the whole thing. And actually it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a total DNF for me, but I ended up finishing it. I think it was okay. It's basically like 2 different groups of people. I mean, there's 2 sisters, and then there's 2 different romances. They both like split off. They have 2 different storylines in the book. And in this world, you basically have not everyone, but these two, it's so confusing. I don't quite understand it. You can have a god that's trapped in your body, and that god is basically a dragon. So there's certain people who that's done on purpose. It's mostly the royalty, but the sister ends up having this almighty god in her, and they both have it, and they both like, struggle with it. I think they both have it. I can't actually quite remember if one of the sisters has it, to be fair. It was like 3 months ago, probably, I read this one. I thought the concept was interesting, and I kind of got into the story, but again, it was just really mediocre. I don't really have any interest in a follow-up. I think there is a follow-up to this story, but if there isn't, I wouldn't even want to read on if there were, So I think it's just like a one and done, and it's not exactly the type of story that I'm very interested in, but there were aspects of it that was interesting. I'm not saying too much about it because quite honestly, I don't remember. Like they have to like go under the palace and, do things. Okay, I'm a terrible booktuber. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to put The Blood Orchid here. This is by Kylie Lee Baker. So I love The Scarlet Alchemist, which is the first one. This is part of a duology, and I gave that 5-star when I read it like almost like 2 years ago now. I thought it was really, really good and very interesting. These are YA fantasies, but it had like such a horror element to it because basically she brought back the dead. She would find their chi, and there's like this river, and she would find all the lost souls, and she would bring them back to their bodies, and there would basically be walking corpses around the town that she lives in, and then she goes and tries to be an alchemist, a royal alchemist. This all happens in the first book. And then, I don't want to spoil anything what happens in the first, but obviously this is the lead off after that, and I felt like it was very weak. I felt like the book ended on such, not a cliffhanger, but it was just like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? How are we going to resolve this? And I felt like this book started pretty slow, and it was like a month or two later from the first book, and I didn't really quite like that. I think it should have picked up a little bit faster. It was more like, oh, this is what happened, and this is what we're doing right now, and whereas it kind of lost the intensity that the first book had at the end, which is the reason why I wanted to read the second book in the first place, and the reason I really enjoyed the first book. It's a YA fantasy romance. It's fun. If you've read the first book, go ahead and read this one, but quite honestly, it was a disappointment. I did end up giving this a 3-star. Midway point while I was reading, I was like, oh my gosh, this is just not it. I hope it picks up. It did kind of resolve certain things, I guess, but I still didn't really like it. I feel like she wrote such a good book, and then she didn't know where to go with it. And then I also read this one, which is a huge chunk of a book. This is The Courting of Bristol Keats by Mary E. Pearson. So this one I recently read. I feel like it was too long. I feel like the actual idea of this was good. I was hooked on it because it's not super original, but it was like a fantasy romance. I was like, okay, let me find out who this hunky fae is, or whoever he is, like the typical fantasy romance. I'm into all of that, right? And I think when I picked this up, I was like, okay, let me read this. This is kind of like what I'm feeling, what I want to read. But I think it just kind of just fell apart. I don't really know quite how to tell you that. And then there wasn't really an ending. The book ended so flat, almost down, to the point where I was like, are you serious? I do not want to read on after this. This is not a way to end a book. It's like she didn't know how to end the book. I feel like she should have ended the book maybe 100 pages sooner, and then whatever happened at the end of this book would be in the second book, because it kind of, you want your book to kind of have an arc, right? You want it to go up and peak and be interesting, maybe a little bit of a lull, and then at the end of the book, some sort of resolution or some sort of cliffhanger or some sort of, intensity that makes you want to read on in the story. This book, really, it was kind of flat throughout, But basically it's about this human who goes and she ends up going to the Fae world. She is trying to find her father, and for whatever reason she's kind of been told, or she thinks there's something like he's there, whatever. And that's kind of as much as I want to say, because I don't quite know what's a spoiler and what's not at that point. So if I say any more, it probably will be a little bit of a spoiler. But anyway, I just feel as though the novel was pretty flat. The world building, there wasn't really much of it, so I couldn't really picture the Fae world, quite honestly. I just had to imagine it from other books that I've read and just like my own imagination and just like sort of like think what was going on. But I didn't really quite understand some of the magic systems as well, because a lot of the Fae characters had certain types of magic, and then there were ones that were weaker, ones that were stronger, but I didn't really quite understand the hierarchy in a way, or like who gets to decide. There's a reason why they brought her there, and obviously you find that out, but it still just seems like a weak point in the story. So anyway, I wouldn't recommend it just simply because it's super long and not executed very well. Okay, so the rest of the books I do think that I would recommend. Not all of them are amazing though. Some of them I still gave a 3-star, but some of them I really enjoyed. So first one here, this is in no order by the way, but I did read the first one of the Grace of Kings, which is obviously called the Grace of, this is actually called the Dandelion Dynasty series, something like that. I have all of the books. This took me almost the whole of July. I think I read it in July or like midway through. I started in June and then I finished midway through July. This is, I mean, I've read longer books. This is about over 600 pages, but it is so dense in the way that it is written. And I have seen some people say that it reads like a textbook. I didn't think it did. I actually didn't mind the writing style, but you can't just like skim over it, you know? I think if you're reading a lot of like fantasy romance, those books are so easy to read, quite honestly. You don't really need a brain cell to read those, but I feel like when you're reading, this is like pure fantasy, and there's a ton of character build-up, character development, world building in this book alone. So you kind of have to be tuned into that. And if you don't find it interesting, I can absolutely see why people DNF this, why they don't like it, why they don't want to continue on with the series. Personally, for me, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very interesting. I thought it was very well done in the sense that it did create this world in my head, and I did quite understand what was going on. I really understood the characters, their motivations as well, the intricacies of the politics and the backstabbing, and there were moments in this book when I was like, don't do it, don't. But I could see the inevitable. I could see, you know, this spiraling out of hand where it completely does, and these, you know, these two friends who were, you know, fighting together actually end up being on opposing teams. And you know, it was almost frustrating to read because you could see it happening, and it happened and developed that way. But it's also just a reflection of humans themselves and our just our faults, and how we're driven by ego, or we're driven by power, but we don't necessarily kind of like take a step back and really review things. So I thought this was so good. I do hope that the other books are going to be easier to read, because it did take me a long time, and I was really invested in it, quite honestly. There's a little bit of a fantasy element in here. I know that the first book is based on a lot of historical facts. I wouldn't say that it's really historically accurate, but it is loosely based off of real things and situations that happened during this time. Now, the rest of the books are not. So I'm very interested in like continuing on with this series. I would highly recommend it if you are interested in going into like a fantasy world where you really have to kind of concentrate. I mean, I know a lot of people aren't going to be interested in that. I personally, if I had to listen to myself, I'd be like, I don't think I'm interested in that either. But I felt like I was going into a challenge with this, and I felt good about it, like after reading it. If I go into the second book and I I can't get into it. Obviously, I'll let you know. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was written well. And if it gets better after this one, then I definitely want to give the rest of the books a go. So that's why I'm recommending it. Obviously don't know if the whole series is going to be amazing, but I personally like this, and I'm glad that I stuck through it. There wasn't a time when I wanted to DNF it. I was just reading it, kind of taking it in, you know, just going at my own pace, and I think that worked. If I maybe were vlogging or just trying to talk about it while I was reading it, it might have put me in a mood, but I just picked it up when I wanted to read it, right? So I quite enjoyed that. The most recent one that I read is The Paris Apartment. So this one is by Lucy Foley. This is the first book, I believe, that I've ever read from her, but I think she does a lot of crime novels or whatever. Anyway, so I haven't read a thriller in a very long time. I did pick this up at the charity store when I was in England. That was like 2 Januaries ago. This was a long time ago that I've had this. I got it for £1. And you know what? I actually really enjoyed this. It wasn't super, you know, it was pretty predictable, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. And we had a little bit of a road trip last week, and I kind of finished the rest of it. But other than that, it didn't take me very long to read. And I think when it comes to thrillers, I really have to be in the mood, and I can't read a thriller back to back to back. So because I haven't read a thriller in a really, really long time, I'm probably scaling this up a little bit higher than I should. If I read thrillers all the time, this is, you know, I still think this is a mediocre thriller, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I was enjoying reading it while I was reading it. And I will keep it. I don't think I will unhaul this or anything, but I'll probably keep it just in case somebody's around and wants to read a book. I would say, well, read this one. It's easy read, and it's intriguing, kind of know what's going on. And it starts off straight away. So it basically, without giving away too much, it's about this brother and sister. The brother lives in Paris, and the sister wants to come visit him. She's coming to visit him. She gets there. He is not there. And then throughout the whole book, she's trying to figure out where he is, what's happened to him. And the neighbors are a little bit iffy. She starts to get to know what's going on, and then obviously at the end you have resolution, right? So it's interesting, not unpredictable by any means, but I liked it, and I would recommend it in the sense that if you don't read a lot of thrillers, that is probably a fun one to read. If you do read a lot of thrillers, then maybe it's not, but you know, I don't read a lot of thrillers, so it's hard for me to judge. This one's a little bit lower on the list, but I do think it had some interesting aspects to it, and it was kind of an easy read. So this is The Rose Bargain by Sasha Payton Smith, and this one I read not too long ago. A lot of these are either Fairy Loot or Illumicrate. This is a Fairy Loot edition. This is such a cute little gorgeous book. But inside the book, there are, it kind of went a little bit further than I was expecting. I thought it was going to be like a typical romantasy book, but there were some horror elements, a little bit, not a lot, honestly, but it was a little bit more than I was expecting. And it was a little bit more gruesome, like in certain parts, than I was expecting. It's about basically this world that we live in. It's kind of, it is this world, I believe. But what happened centuries ago was that a fae came and took over and became the queen, and she rules England now, basically. And she's been doing that for like 400 years or so. And every year, this is actually in the 1800s as well, but every year all these young girls or men, when they come of age, they come and ask for a gift from the queen. It's like a bargain, right? And so like a lot of them asked to be prettier, or to like, you know, fix their nose or whatever, because obviously plastic surgery didn't exist back then. But you know, there's a lot of it is superficial or just to make them rich. But as a bargain, they either have to like give their left toe, or they have to, I don't know, bleed out from their ear for 9 days every month or whatever. Like silly, weird bargains that actually some of them are pretty gruesome. Or they have to like forget about their whole world and everybody around them, or never be able to speak to their loved ones again. You know, some of them are harsher than others. Some of them, they just like, oh, they can't hear out of their left ear or whatever, something like that. I think it just, the queen decides what it is, and she's mean on some of them for sure. So in this, we're following, I can't remember her name, but we're following a girl, Ivy Benton. We're following her, and she has come of age. Her sister kind of derailed the year prior. Something went on. She doesn't really know. Her sister doesn't want to tell her or her parents, but her parents have kind of fallen down in society, and so she is coming of age, and she wants to, you know, she doesn't. At first, she doesn't. She wants to ask the queen for help to get her parents back into society. But then what happens is this year, the queen's son is coming of age too, and he wants to find a wife. So they actually do a little bit of a competition, and the competition is kind of interesting. There's a few aspects of it where it's a little bit, you know, darker in certain areas. And obviously, you know, there's things that happen, there's romance, backstabbing, and whatnot. I actually thoroughly enjoyed this for what it was. I don't think it's amazing, but the ending was kind of interesting, and it does make me want to read the next book. I don't think the next book has even been written, but I would be interested to see where the story goes, because I kind of just enjoyed it. I think it is a YA fantasy, but whatever. I usually like YA romanticities, but I would recommend it if you want just like a cute little read like that, but have a little bit of a gore aspect to it, and then also a little bit of like a competition aspect to it as well. Okay, and then I didn't know how to rank these, because there's books here that I liked more than others, but I kind of read them all together, right? So I have the Caraval series, and I have the Once Upon a Broken Heart series here. Now, obviously, like this is the order that you read them in, and there's definitely ones here that I like more than others. So just to give it a little backstory, I've spoken about this on my other channel, my makeup channel, before, because I just love these. I loved a couple of these books, but I read Once Upon a Broken Heart maybe back in April time, and obviously this is the first of the Once a Broken Heart series, but I hadn't read the Caraval series at all, and I thought, well, maybe I should just pick up all the books and figure it out, because I love Jax. Like if you want to know a little bit about me, I'm a Jax of Hearts stan. Okay, we'll just leave it at that. I felt very lovesick reading this. Okay, so I read that in April, picked up all the rest of the books, and then this summer I was like, well, let me just like read all of them, right? So read the Caraval series. Now, I know that these have a lot of criticism towards them, and I get you. I understand completely. They are not written the best. They are not very original. But I wanted to read them because of Jax, okay? And I wanted to know what the backstory was of the world. So Caraval, I'll just go through one at a time, just really quickly, because most of you probably read these. I think I gave this stuff 3 or 4 star. I thought it was fine. It set up the world. I kind of understood what the Caraval sort of was, and I liked it. I thought it was fine. I liked the little romance in it. I thought it was fine. Legendary, I really didn't like. I know I've seen a lot of people say this is their favorite out of the 3. I think I gave this a 2. I really did not enjoy it. I did not enjoy the love story. I didn't like the sister in this book. I liked the other sister, because it follows 2 sisters, right? In the first book, one of the sisters she writes and writes and writes, and she's finally invited to go to this Caraval, which is like this magical carnival, basically. But when you get there, you play this game, and it's kind of sinister, and there's like, you know, you don't really know what's real and what's not. Anyway, that happens in the first book, and there is a little bit of a romance that happens, and I kind of enjoyed the romance. This one, her sister ends up going, right? Her sister is the main protagonist in this one, the main POV. You don't really see the original sister from the first book in this book all that much. And you don't really see the romance from the first book in this book either. This sets up a completely different POV and romance with her sister and somebody else. Now, I didn't like it. I didn't like it. I gave it a 2 star. I thought it was too long for what it was, and it just followed a little bit too much of this same type of story as the first one. Even though they were different, it wasn't interesting enough for me. So I gave it a 2 star. Then I read Finale. Now, I rated this really high because Jax of Hearts is in this, okay? So I think that's really the only reason why I rated this higher. I know a lot of people disappointed in this one. I think I gave this a 4-star. I liked it way more than Legendary, but that's only because my little wicked Jacks of Hearts is in here. So if you know, you know. There's nothing he can do wrong even when he's doing bad, and he does bad 99% of the time. But I just think I would have picked him over anybody any day of the week, okay? So I read those 3. Now, would I recommend the Caravel series? Probably not at this point. I don't think I would, but I have it here because if you want to invest more in the backstory of it before you dive into Once Upon a Heart or Broken Heart series, then yes, read it, but don't read it expecting it to be amazing, because it's just simply not. And it doesn't matter if it is or it isn't, right? I think it depends how you want to judge a book. I don't mind reading mediocre or silly romantic-y books if it still gives me that little ooh giddy feeling sometimes if I like a certain character. These books are not written like the classics. The writing is not amazing, and I don't necessarily go into these books for amazing writing. It's very rare that I read a book and I'm like, this writing is beautiful. There's only certain authors that I have read so far in the last few years where I've come back to reading that I have felt like the writing has been amazing. Most of the time I'm just looking for an interesting character, somebody to fancy, fun little twist, and that's it really. Like, that's all I'm looking for. Anyway, so Once Upon a Broken Heart, I reread this. I gave it 5-star back in April. I reread it this summer. I loved it. I read it in a day because I was like just reading the parts really I wanted to read, but I wanted to remind myself what happened. I honestly think this is the best one out of all 6. I did obviously read the next 2, but this one, just comparing it to everything else, this was her best book in this series by far. I loved like how it had different aspects to it. It's not a huge long book, but it had the whole vampire thing. It just was good. And also the romance in here, the teasing of it, it was delectable. I'm sorry, but it was the best. It teased you so much in this book, more so than honestly these 2 books, which were disappointing. Obviously I read them because I wanted to read more about what happens with Jacks of Hearts, but I was ultimately disappointed. So The Ballad of Never After I thought was mediocre. I think a lot of people love this book. I didn't think it was amazing. Just comparing it to the first one, I didn't think it was amazing. I think I just gave it maybe a 3-star. It was fine. It was fine. Then I read A Curse of True Love, which I know a lot of people are disappointed in this book. I myself, I'm not necessarily disappointed, but it just fell flat for me. It was pretty just, you know, nothing really. It did get resolved, but I think the way that it got resolved was just not what I was expecting for the last book of this series that I had fallen in love with. So, as a whole, would I recommend them? I mean, I would absolutely recommend these 3, more so just to get into the story and enjoy it, but just kind of expect that the books get worse as you go. That's it, really. So those are all of the books that I have read over the last 3 months. I am currently reading The Queen of Nothing. This is the 3rd book of the Elfheim trilogy. I don't even know if it's a trilogy because I feel like there's more books to it. This is from Holly Black. I really don't get this. I don't get this series at all. The last 2 books, I've given them like 3 stars. This one, I feel like a lot of people give 5 stars. I'm halfway through and I just don't get it. I don't think there's any romance. Like I'm not totally in love with the romance in this story. Even from the 2nd book, I didn't really quite, it didn't get me. And so I'm just reading it, but it's not pulling at me. And then I also started reading the Honey Guide. This was like, oh my gosh, where's my, you know what? My son probably took it out. He always takes my bookmarks out. Anyway, I started reading this about a month ago and then I put it down. It's not a DNF. It's just, I didn't really feel like reading it at the time. This is Richard Crompton. I do want to pick it back up though, because this is set in Nairobi and it's like a detective crime type of thriller and it's very, very interesting. It's just, I wasn't in the mood for it at the time, but I definitely want to get back into it. And I have no idea where I am though, because my son's taking my bookmark out. Does anyone else have a child who takes their bookmarks out? He always takes it out and leaves it. And now I don't know where I am, but whatever, I'll figure it out. But like I said, I do have a bunch of books that I DNF. So there are more books that I tried and I did read like half of them maybe. before I DNF them. And those I'll speak about in an unhaul shortly. So hopefully this video entertained you, gave you some ideas of what to read, what not to read. Maybe you have some of these sitting on your shelf and you now can DNF them, or maybe you can pick them up and read them if you have similar taste to me. I'm not overly critical about certain genres. Like I said, if it's a fantasy romance, I am not going to be looking at the writing style too much, but if the writing style gets in the way, that's when I'm like, oh no, I can't get through this. So there's only a few where that's been a problem, but otherwise, if it's okay writing and I just like the character, then I'll probably rate it high. You know, if it gets me, if it gets my feet kicking in a delightful way and I'm like, ooh, what's gonna happen? You know the feeling. Anyway, so hopefully everyone's doing well. Thank you so much, and stay tuned because I will try to be posting a little bit more on this channel. I always say that. I've been so bad. I've been so bad at the second channel, but I'm gonna try to do a little bit more. So stay tuned and keep reading, and I'll see you later. Bye.